with the session for today. Thank you. We'll be recording. So I'm Sarah Bishop-Root. I'm the Course Sites Program and Community Manager. I'll be facilitating the session today. Other sessions that you may have attended, Sharon Anthis and Lauren and Misty are the other facilitators that join us throughout the BITS series. I also just kind of wanted to mention that I help institutions as they're thinking about their MOOC strategy. So if anyone is evaluating Course Sites as a MOOC platform, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed on this page, as you see. Here's just a reminder of our upcoming webinars in the BITS series. We hope that you're able to attend all of these great opportunities. And again, registration is at blackboard.com/BITS. So I'd like to just move forward and introduce our presenter for today, Cheryl Cyrus, who comes to us with a wealth of information. She's a senior consultant with Blackboard Consulting. In that role, she provides strategic and functional consulting to higher ed, pro-ed, K-12 districts, and Learn for Sales clients. Prior to coming to Blackboard, her background included being a distance education director for a Georgia college and instructional technology implementation analyst for the state of Florida Department of Education. And she currently resides in the Florida Panhandle and South Georgia border. So joining me in welcoming Cheryl, thank you so much, Cheryl, and I'll pass it on to you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. It was a pleasure to meet with you this afternoon. So I just wanted to begin by recapping our purpose for joining today, which is creating a welcoming course environment. So today we're going to look at how to provide orientation information, as well as course links and video everywhere. So when we think about your course and we stand outside of your course as the designer or the instructor, we might perhaps want to look at it and truly feel whether or not we feel it's cold or warm. And this would be to the participants. So if we stepped out of our role and looked at our course, we might think of ways that could make it a little bit more warm and inviting, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. So initially, as an instructor, back in the old days, if you will, I would actually write postcards to my students and encourage them and invite them into the new classroom for the coming year. And of course, this was elementary school. But it provided a great gateway for me to connect with the students and to the parents. And by this way, it was almost having an invitation to a warmer atmosphere, so that when they opened the classroom door for the first time, if you will, I believe that the reception was a little bit more one-on-one, so that we had previously made the connection. So I wanted to extend that same thought with us today. When we provide a welcome message, exactly what would that entail? As you know, in Blackboard, we have the opportunity to use the email functionality as a tool to all our students. So seamlessly, we can create quickly, if you will, an email to the students prior to the course would begin. And this would be assuming that as an instructor or instructional designer, you have privy to your course prior to its opening. And so if that were the case, wouldn't you think it might be advantageous to go ahead and send out an email prior to the course beginning to not only invite them and to welcome them, but also to provide some type of external information that if they were unable to get into the course or activate the credentials to get into the course, that they had a way to contact you directly. I know that some of the universities actually have policies where the first day, especially face-to-face or even 3 days for online, that they must make connection with you in order not to be dropped. So I thought this was a great example that we could go ahead and extend an email invitation from the course and also provide an external resource to contact you should there be any need for them to do so in somewhat of an emergency nature. And with the functionality of Google Voice, I think this is a great gateway that you can provide a number that wouldn't necessarily be a home or a cell number to them, because you can actually create this abstract number, if you will, that when they dial it, it's going to dial your cell or home number depending on how you've set that up. So I think this is a great way to, again, to extend the olive leaf, if you will, to your students, to let them know that I'm here for you, and even if there were an emergency, you have a way to contact me. And of course, this would be personal preference, but just a pretty good thing to keep in mind. Also, what's nice is in that email that you send as a welcome, that it might also be nice to provide some type of help desk resources. So in this sense, you can go ahead and send any of the college's resources that you have, especially for technical assistance, that they can reach out to, again, over and above the information that you're providing to them. Another nice thing to do is to let them know perhaps what the course map might be, what some of the expectations might be. And this certainly doesn't have to be anything long. It could be very topical. It could be 3 or 4 bullet points of what we're going to cover this semester or this quarter. So again, just a nice inviting way to do that. Now some of you may be saying, well, why wouldn't I use the announcements to do that? And you have the exact correct answer. The announcements are an excellent way to do this, and I actually would encourage you to replicate your email in an announcement. And so you have to remember, as online, we actually have to sometimes work harder to make those intimate connections with our students so that they know that not only are we present, but we also have an inviting, nurturing environment that we want them to be part of as soon as they begin. So I don't think there's anything wrong with actually taking the verbiage of the email and actually putting it in an announcement as well. Now, if you have the time, certainly it would be nice if you cleaned it up or changed it just a little, but still included those resources in that announcement. And many of you may be saying, well, I can create the announcement and also send an email of the announcement. And of course, that would be a win-win, because not only are you sending the announcements, but you're also sending the email at the same time of the announcement. But remember when we began this slide that I encouraged you that over and above that, that an email is sent out prior to the course even beginning. Again, just something simple, letting them know that you're excited for the new course to begin. So next we're going to talk about introductions, and I know you probably already do this. In 8ly as instructors, we send out an introduction or somewhat of a bio of ourselves. And with the new multimedia and the technology, it's really nice that we don't necessarily have to send this out in a static text, if you will. So it's nice to use those contacts, the tool contacts in Blackboard. I always go ahead and push out my my information right in that contact center in case the students want to contact me at any time. But we're speaking over and above that. We're speaking about that initial introduction, whether you've had the student before in a previous course or program. I really encourage you to set up that and initiate that introduction. So commonly when we think of introductions, we think of it almost in a binary. I, the instructor, provide my introduction to you, and in turn I'm assuming that you're digesting it and perhaps you're viewing it. But when we think about how to build a community of learners, and in a sense we always want our course to be a community of learners, we want to facilitate that learner and that community, but we certainly don't want to be the stage on the stage, if you will, sage on the stage, if you will. So with that, said, I encourage you to look at this slide and kind of keep it in mind, because I've purposefully shown you, when we think about, left to right, that if we could encourage the student-to-student interaction with introductions, and then the student to instructor, and then lastly the instructor back to all of them. What a nice and little bit different way, if you will, to spruce up some interaction with the students. Those of you that are hosting and have upgraded to SP11, SP10 or 11, you probably are really comfortable in starting to see that the global navigation is really starting to enhance our capability of promoting that student to student. So when we think about those introductions, sometimes maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable to step out of the way that we usually are the one that does the push down. But perhaps if we open it up and think of it as a whole, and how the students can immediately start to interact with one another. What type of tools and how could we build that communication and that interaction to begin them to start talking to one another? And you both, all of us both know together that the student-to-student interaction is going to be a much more collaborative atmosphere, if you will, than the student-to-instructor information. And so again, I really encourage you that you keep this slide in mind and strive to promote the student-to-student interaction over and above the instructor to the student. Another nice thing that you can do is also establish some type of office hours. Now I know that many universities require the virtual office hours, but one thing that stuck out, I worked with a colleague and I just thought this was so novel of her and it just worked out so nicely. But she had her static virtual office hours, but she also would get onto Skype, or she would open up the IM in her different courses anytime that she was working in the courses to either upload more information or respond to students or just work within the environment. And what she told the students is, if you see me on chat and I'm there, go ahead and talk to me just as if you were walking past my office door and you stuck your head in and had a question or had a comment to make. And what she found is it was really advantageous. Not only did she feel that there was a more comfortable feeling amongst her and the students, and this was completely online, but she also felt that it cut down on the amount of questions that were being pushed to either the discussion board or email, because she was almost just in the minute, a just-in-time type of resource that the students could ask questions that perhaps they were in the middle of doing something, and it was a very quick question. She was able to do that for them. So I thought that I would pass that on, and I thought that was an excellent way of utilizing that information. So when we speak about acquainting students with the course tools, this is huge in an online course environment. It really lends itself nicely to both the web enhanced and the hybrid as well. But we really want to drive this factor home because it's so important for our students, especially with the technology growing almost every day, that we want to ensure that the students are comfortable with the tools. And so what I mean with acquaint the students with the tools is completely different than you actually using the tools in an academic sense. So we always want to remember that you introduce any tool that you feel that you're going to use within the course, you introduce it in a very non-academic way. So an example may be, we spoke about those introductions. So perhaps the student was allowed to use any type of medium that they were comfortable with to reach out to other students to share something about themselves to begin the interaction. And then remember that in the middle of that slide it was the student to the instructor. And again, I would still encourage the student to use any type of medium that they're comfortable with and or to reach out something that might be new to them. But as the instructor, it would be nice if you would use a tool that you did not see them using. And so commonly that might be the blog. So if my students were creating on the discussion board, if you will, they had like an introduction thread that was available to them, or they had the availability to just go ahead and chat with one another. Those are excellent tools, but it would be nice if in the instructor, when you do your intro, if you use a tool tool that you're seeing them not use. And so like I said, commonly we see the blogs not usually used by the students. It seems to be one of those top-down tools that are always used. So as an instructor, I could create my bio in a blog and ask the students to comment on it and have the students comment on each other's comments as far as they could extend those conversations, likeness or differences or interests. And so what's happening is you're acquainting the student with the new tool, and you're also acclimating them to being able to use the comment feature. So I think that would be a great way to introduce that tool as well. Now we spoke about the different ways that the students can introduce themselves, and most commonly they will use the discussion board. It seems like to be that steadfast tool that we're all most comfortable with. And so as they reach out to that, you again want to encourage them to not only post on the thread, but also make replies or comments to those threads for the forum that you've set up. And I know that most of you probably already do this anyway, but ensure that you have that discussion board readily available for them to use as some type of a water cooler or a class lounge, something that they can easily go in and out of in a very non-academic way. And speaking of that, one of the tips that I can pass on to you that is a best practice is when you have these discussion boards or the blogs, journals, or wikis, any of those that you're using initially to create this environment, if you will, this learner community, and you're using them in a non-academic way, I might encourage you to make the discussion boards that are academic in nature. So the discussion board that is relational to Unit 1, Lesson 4, go ahead and make that unavailable so that when the learner first goes to the discussion board for the first time, the only thing they see is that water cooler or that class lounge. And so immerse them in the tool, let them get acclimated to it, and then they'll begin to see that discussion board come up in the academic sense. And again, I think you'll have a much better receiving to the tool, and that as well goes over to the blogs or journals or wikis. Okay? So the other thing that I might pass on to you is survey. Surveys seem to be always used in a culminating activity. And what's nice about surveys is we could actually begin right after the introduction. We can begin our course with a survey. And the survey may be completely open-ended. It could be anything that you can think of, maybe what they know about the course, what they're expecting to get. Is this course part of their major, part of their program? Just questions like that. Something that is very non-evaluative, if you will. And so by creating the survey, obviously the student is going to use the survey to complete the survey. And so what you've done already is acclimated them to an assessment tool. So as you begin to build out a quiz or an assessment, they've already acclimated to that survey. And what's really nice is you can go ahead and post those survey results just with, in a general nature, and you can use that to begin those conversations with your announcements to use those results and start to connect your learners with one another. The last thing that I can actually encourage you to do is to actually create an assignment as well. So the assignment, again, in a non-academic way, could also be the student's introduction. So wouldn't it be nice, again, for those of you that have upgraded to SP 10 or 11 with the video everywhere, that the student could go ahead and actually post a video of themselves introducing themselves. So if you go ahead and make that an assignment, again, the win is that the student is acclimating to the tool. They're understanding how to go ahead and submit this assignment to you in, again, a non-evaluative way. So you can begin to start to acclimate the student to the different tools so that they are comfortable, and there's been no evaluation done whatsoever at this point. So lastly, I would like to also encourage you to provide understanding. So this goes back to some of my pre-service teacher days, if you will, when I was in college. And I remember a couple things that I was told that I think we've gone to somewhat of a paradigm that perhaps we've changed that in the online spectrum. So I'm asking to ensure that students understand what's required for them to succeed. And by that, I know, again, best practice that most of you already do this, that you provide the course outcomes. What should the student know? What should the student expect to know when they leave this course or they have fulfilled the requirements of it? And then next, when we think about that curriculum alignment, how is the curriculum that they are fulfilling aligned to those outcomes? What is the connection there? Sometimes we provide excellent curriculum, whether it's ours or proprietary or publishers, but again, the student needs to understand how does that curriculum tie to those outcomes. That's very important in adult learning. We really see value if we understand why it is that we're learning this and how it eventually is going to provide the result to the final outcome. Also, the readily available resource links, and what I mean by this is those would be your extension links. So those that would be optional perhaps, whether it's this course or program of study. You always have the student that wants to learn more, that wants to dive deeper. So it's really nice, and I know that most of us always have more information than we probably always put up there just because there's so much of it. But wouldn't it be nice to have an optional area that the students that are interested in learning more have those resources readily available to them? Again, similarly, it reminds me of in a classroom where I always had, again, this is going back now, don't laugh, but we always had a set of encyclopedias in the classroom, and so very rarely, I would say, unless we were doing quote-unquote a report on a certain item, would the students be pulling those encyclopedias. But you always had one or two students that in their spare time, or just if they wanted to extend something of the learning within a novel or a book or even the textbook, that they would go ahead and pull that. So again, we want to do the same things. We want to provide those external resources for them and show them that we have a well-rounded, a holistic, if you will, course environment. When we speak about grading policies, I know that those are innately part of your syllabus or the course information, but wouldn't it be nice if the grading policy was a separate entity of that syllabus so that it was part of the syllabus, but it also was a document that could stand alone? And I say that in as much as when we start to move forward with course links, it's advantageous for the student when they look at, and I actually am saying this affectionately for my two students, one in grad and one in undergrad, and I'll ask them how much of a percentage, what percentage of this is going to this this overall grade, or how, what is the breakdown of the matrix or the rubric, and they'll always have to flush through the different papers to get to it. Wouldn't it be nice to have that grading policy within those assignments or those assessments, to have that link readily available? So when you think about designing your syllabus, think if you can't extract that grading policy, that though it's part of the syllabus, it's a document that you could also set aside or even replicate and extract it from it. And then the last two items, I'm sure you already do this by design, but the rubrics for all gradable assignments, and these do not have to be very granular. They can be as generic as possible. And once you start creating those, you'll find that they're very repetitive, so that you're not always recreating the rubrics. When we think about rubrics for gradable assignments, we usually think of curriculum and content. We want to be cognizant to know that participation is a key function and expectation, if you will, in an online environment, especially in your group environments. So we want to provide those rubrics on the forefront to the students so that they know what those expectations are. So not only are the expectations within the rubric, but also what about examples? And this goes back to what I was saying when I was in pre-service, where the art teacher would hold up an example and they said, oh no, you're not supposed to show the student what the teacher's example is, because the student will strive to be that and not feel as comfortable. But in an online, I feel that's very important that you have some examples, and examples can be very generic. They can be screenshots, or they can be perhaps a past example from a student that you've erased all personal information, as well as provided if you will, the acceptance of the student that you're able to use their paper as an example or their artifact as an example, especially any type of multimedia or photography, anything like that. I think it's a great use of that. I saw a great use of photos used in an architecture course, and I thought it was great because my vision of what the expectation was wasn't what the example was. So it was really nice for me to see that it was supposed to be a storyboard in nature. And so again, I just encourage you to use some of those examples and just make sure that you elicit the right permissions from the people that you do plan to use it and hide their names. So before we begin to the next section, I just wanted to ask if there was any questions you have regarding, creating this welcoming environment, utilizing some of those best practices and tips that we've addressed. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So the next section is going to talk about course links. And so I've posed this as silos or portholes, and I actually had to ask my daughter if I was using the correct terminology because as you can imagine, I'm a little bit past Harry Potter, but I did have Alice in Wonderland in mind, and that's what it reminded me of. So if you can associate to either the portholes in Harry Potter series, or if you're like me with the Alice in Wonderland where she goes through the different portholes seamlessly. So I just wanted to talk to that extent. If you looked at your course right now and you were being honest, I would like you to ask yourself if your students click from one section to the other to gain entry to in and out the different doors, or do they have a seamless entry environment that provides a continuum so that they don't necessarily have to walk in a door, close the door, leave that door, and walk out to the next section. So that's what I would ask you to stand back and look at your course and make that determination. And we'll talk about how you can begin to have that if perhaps your answer is, I'm seeing a little bit of silos, maybe not completely, but just in some areas. So a nice way to curtail those silos is to provide course links, and this is probably one of the best, if not favorite tools, and unfortunately not used a lot, at least in the designs that I see. So course links are obviously just a hyperlink. It's to provide a shortcut in the environment that allows the learner to go from one area to another. Now, of course, the key takeaway here is you would go ahead and design your course almost maturely to every section that you have by creating it, because you need to provide those shortcuts, if you will, those portholes, by addressing it in the course links. And you can only do that by opening up a course map, and the course would already be designed and mature. So when we think about the different options that we have, one of the best practices that I've seen done commonly is under assignments. So sometimes you might have an activity and it's under a certain assignment, but you might also have the assignment that's part of a bigger project. Maybe that assignment is part of one of 5 within the course that they have to complete for almost even a capstone or a project instead of just an individual assignment. So it would be nice to provide a course link to perhaps the course calendar, or perhaps we go back to that grading policy and providing the grading policy. Now what's nice is you know that course links can or cannot be clicked upon. So if you provide a course link, it just means that you are giving the learner the option to have the shortcut, but it doesn't necessarily take the learner there. So that's really nice, because you will have learners that gravitate to either the seamless backdoor entry, or those that you'll have that actually leave an environment and go back to that course menu step by step. So it's important that that you have the availability to provide these course links. And remember that the course link just provides this hyperlink, this shortcut within the course. It's not actually counting against any of your quota. So if you're concerned about the size of your course and you don't want to have double entries in there, you can be assured that that's not what's going to happen. Okay. So let's go ahead and start looking at the different ways that we can provide these course links. Now, I know that all of you probably know this, but just to make sure, remember that in Blackboard we have different nomenclature depending on the license that you have. So it's either going to be referred to as a course link or a class link, but they are synonymous. So you'll notice in your course menu that when you open up your course menu, you can actually design to have a course link right on the menu and have that available to the learners to go in and out of so that they don't have to actually go through the content. Perhaps you have content, let's look at Lesson 3, and in Lesson 3 there are 12 different chapters and you want to refer to this one area. Perhaps it's a resource or something that they gravitate to. You could actually go ahead and set up a course link. So the rule of thumb in putting it on the course menu, or at least this is the way I like to explain which way that you should do it. Should you provide a course link on the course menu or in content? And what I like to explain and work with instructors to say is, if you feel that this shortcut is going to be something that's used within the entire course, so I as the learner really need this shortcut, perhaps it is the grading policy. Over and above almost everything that I do and see, I could use this course link. Then the answer would be to definitely put it on your course menu. It's hard because course menus, as you know, best design, smaller is better, shorter is better. So you want to really think about which links as far as the shortcuts that you want to put on that course menu. And again, the rule of thumb is it going to serve the entire course or the majority of the course? The next option you would have is actually to put the course link in announcements. And I do this almost all the time. Every announcement that I create, I try to put in there the link to the section that I'm referring to. So if it were a question that came up perhaps on the discussion board, I can still go ahead and put that link right to that. If it's something in the syllabus that I'm referring to, again, I can go right back there. If I'm introducing a new lesson, again, I can put that, that class or that course link right in there so that the user, as they're reading my announcement, they can go ahead and just click on it and immediately get to the section that I'm referring to. When you're within content, you can also create your course or your class link. You can drop it within any content area as far as when you put build content and have it as an item by itself. Or you can also drop it in a learning module, a lesson plan, or a content folder. So when we think of best practice in using a class link within these organizers, you might want to think to yourself, going back to that grading policy, well, if there was a specific grading policy for a subsection, it would be nice to drop that shortcut right in that lesson plan or that learning module that it has relevancy for. So you can see outside of having the link on the course menu that would serve, if you will, holistically the whole course. So there definitely is a best practice on when and where to use that functionality. So let's talk about our atmosphere, whether or not we believe it's static or dynamic. And again, this is for you to step outside of your comfort zone and look at your course or courses and try to think about how dynamic is your atmosphere. Are you really keeping up with those announcements, and are you keeping, a dynamic presence within the course? And so when you ask yourself that, you might say, well, how else can I embellish this course to be more present, to be more in tune with the students so that they know that I'm here with them at every moment? So there's actually been some great studies on that. Even pictures of other people, when you look online, they've done some studies where the students that were allowed to upload avatars as opposed to those who did not have avatars, that there was a much more integral online community within those courses. So you can only imagine that as we begin utilizing the video everywhere, which is now in SB 10 and 11, that we're now going to also be able to have video, if you will, like a video conferencing. So you can, the possibilities are absolutely endless. I don't even know where to begin. Obviously, at the forefront, video office hours are just above all, the absolute best. I know the video office hours I've done in the past through a chat window definitely did not have the same feedback and the same relevancy that if I and the student were able to talk to one another. You can just imagine the win for both of us. So what's nice about video everywhere is not only can we provide this opportunity now to introduce the students to not only the course, but introduce them to the different lessons, to introduce them to different concepts, to use it as a teaching tool, just as if we would if we were standing in front of the course or facilitating a course. But now we can also extend that to provide feedback to the student within the assignment. So I can only imagine where this is going. So as an instructor, especially in like an English comp or even a multimedia, where I actually go in there and provide feedback, and I could even have diagrams. I mean, there's nothing that I can't do or show to the student as I'm providing that video everywhere. Another nice takeaway of the video everywhere is also going to be that the students are able to provide that video everywhere. So as you create an assignment or assessment, you're going to also allow the students to be able to upload their video. You may say, well, you know, I really want them to write this, or I want them to be able to do a compare and contrast, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with still asking for that assignment to be done that way. But what would be nice also is if, you know, through the learning, if it was some type of compare and contrast assignment that you had, maybe the video component could be what their process was, or as they look through it and reread it, what was their process in the writing process. So they could almost do you know, some reflective thinking that was over as an extension of that assignment. I think that originally when we had the video everywhere, everyone thought that it was somewhat of a top-down tool. Like as facilitators and as instructors, we were going to be able to have this wonderful tool. We're going to provide feedback. We're going to do everything for the student. And now what we're starting to see is it's a tool for everyone. So don't be afraid to use this tool to have the students use it. Wouldn't it be nice to have the students explain what their, you know, if it had a scenario, if you were in marketing or perhaps a business course, wouldn't it be nice to have the student actually be the one that did the storytelling? Like if you were if you were on the receiving end, and you would ask them to prepare a video to you know, whether it's marketing, like I said, that's the best example I can think of. And so it's absolutely wonderful. And what about those foreign languages? I mean, you know, when I think about those courses where we put on the headset and repeated, wouldn't this be nice to be able to have the student provide that right to you, as well as the instructor? So remember that not only can you record and upload the videos, you also can allow the students to do that. And this is going to be seamlessly embedded in any of your course materials and interactions, which of course lends itself for student-to-student relationship in a very high and extending way. So when we think about those video everywhere, some of the best practices and tips that I could pass on to you would be to be consistent. So I know that probably goes contrary to this slide, but it really doesn't. Whether it's impromptu or planned, you want to be consistent with your delivery. And what I mean by that is if you begin the course with discussing what you had done the previous week to introduce the new section, which would be a great way to introduce, not through just an announcement to drop that video in there, that in lesson 1 we learned X, Y, and Z, and you'll notice in lesson 2 we're going to connect that and you start to talk about those outcomes or objectives. But when you start to do that, if you do it for the first 3 lessons and then unfortunately you get busy or there's just, you know, it's midterms, we certainly don't want to do that. We want to allow the student to have that expectation. So if you are, whether again it's impromptu or planned, have some type of continuity to it so that the student can depend on it. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, if you get barraged with questions over a certain section, isn't it nice to go ahead and just, you know, provide that feedback immediately, put it in an announcement, and address those questions. You know, I've seen numerous questions come up regarding X, Y, and Z. I just wanted to provide this example to you, and boy, before you know it, they're just, you know, they're happy and you're even happier. So again, I just want to encourage you to what you think you will set out to do to try to keep consistent. So again, I might encourage you to push back and not necessarily, you know, expect that I'm going to deliver, you know, 7 videos a week or 10 videos a week based on X, Y, and Z, but try to start out small and then enhance that, because it can always enhance, but taking away, you might have the students have some disconnect because they were on a roll with the expectation. So another thing that I wanted to pass on to you, I built this in a wiki, is it helps me to remember, and this could just be me, but it helps me to remember how I actually did the video. So that's not to say that I'm encouraging you to write any type of a script. But as you can see here, if you did want to go ahead and provide connections for your lessons or introductions or netiquette, anything like that, what I've done is it just kind of helps me say, well, the past ones that I've done, you know, they were 3 minutes, they were 2 minutes. I started out by talking about the learning objectives. I tied it to the previous option. And again, I hope that you can see here just some schematics, if you will, a blueprint that would help me. And the reason that I chose a wiki to build this in is because the wiki was able to provide different pages to me. So again, I just created the wiki as a private wiki, so the students do not see this. It's within the course, so as I go to create my videos, if I have any question about, oh, what was the nature of that one that I did before, I can go ahead, because you know, you may be producing them every other day, you may produce them once a week, you may produce them at the beginning of each concept, and so they might be, you know, apart. So by using this with the pages, you could go ahead and have whatever topics or concepts that you think would lend nicely, and that way you can just click on the page and easily see what you had done before. Okay, now of course you could use an Excel sheet, I mean anything that you feel that would work for you, but I would really, really encourage you, if you're anything like me, because I even do this with the fonts, you know, when I go ahead and start creating things, I always want to make sure that I have consistency, whether it's the size of the font or the color or the boldness, just so that the learner will definitely pick up on those. So remember that if you do have any type of storyboard, they can be as simple and as generic as, you know, number 1, I always greet them. Number 2, I re-announce what I'm going to speak about. I might even talk about the duration of the unit, and I might talk about, like we had said before, what the transition is from the previous unit to the new unit, and above all, what is the benefit to the learner. So remember, we want to make those connections of how the learner is benefiting from this curriculum to the course outcome. So again, just some ideas that I had that I wanted to pass around. So, so to summarize what we've talked about today, you want to remember to promote a course that is fluid and dynamic. And again, with new global navigation, I believe that you'll see that grow exponentially. Remember also to streamline with consistency, what we were just speaking about, and a continuum. And above all, make sure that you emit a presence, that you're always available and accessible and within the confines that you've set out. So I did want to leave us today with some parting thoughts. I read an excellent article from Faculty Focus, and many of you perhaps have already seen it, but I wanted to share it with you. So I wanted you to take today's session and just kind of keep in mind when you look at your course and when you look at the beginnings of the new course with the new learners, that try to think of it as an occasion. So if you are the host of the occasion, remember that you always want to welcome everyone. So by welcoming them, you can do that through announcements and or email. And make sure that every person feels comfortable. So your tone as you begin your course and the words that you use within your emails and discussion boards, just make sure that it's a very comfortable atmosphere. Remember also not to ignore everyone. Now remember, if you were the host, you would be walking through the room making sure that everyone had been spoken to and trying to make those connections. So we need to do that online as well. Remember to also provide netiquette and to be able to open and close those discussion boards based on discretion. And remember that no one should be silent. So be present in forums, even if it is a water cooler. You know, be able to come in and out of that and be able to see what's happening within your course. And I like this one. It talks about the food at your occasion. It says, serve them something delicious. And by that we mean content. Remember that content can be extremely fluid and extremely dynamic. We don't have to go back to those paper and pencil sheets anymore of just creating an item with static text. And remember to invite them back. And that goes with some of those best practices of scaffolding. So when you think of a discussion board and you ask them to post, remember to scaffold that so that you have something that is a fluid in nature. You're asking them to have a certain action, you're asking them to have a reaction, and then you bring them all back together to react to those reactions so that it becomes a full circle. Remember to spend time with every guest, and that's sometimes hard to do, especially in our bigger courses. So make time to go through and make sure that everyone is either touching the courses and the environment or proactively reach out to them. Remember that you can use those course reports and the user activity to find out where they're gravitating to, what is the areas that are not being used as much as they should, and who are the users that perhaps are the high users and those that perhaps are not, that we want to reach out and make sure that they're not struggling in some way, either academically or socially. Okay, and remember to spread the conversation. I like this one as well. Post on different days and be fluid. Keep the conversations going. Don't make it that it's always Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and everything's due on a Sunday night. Keep it fluid, just as you would if you were walking through a face-to-face classroom. And remember that start up new conversations. If you feel that the conversations are getting stale, push in some type of resource that extends those conversations and ask them what they think about this. It doesn't always have to be evaluative. Just keep the conversations very dynamic. And lastly, make sure that you are visible. This is above all. Make sure that you are present and visible within your virtual classroom. So I hope that's helped encourage you with some tips and tricks and best practices of having a welcoming environment. I look forward to hearing from you, and if we can, I'll go ahead and pause for some questions if you have any.
Cheryl, thank you so much. This was a great session. Karen's been keeping up pretty well in the chat with everyone's questions, but if anyone else has questions, please directly for Cheryl right now, please feel free to type in the chat so we can get those answered for you.
Thanks, Sarah. And while we're doing that, I just wanted to encourage you, if you are aware that we do have Blackboard training online courses. If you wanted to learn more, please check us out at www.blackboard.com/training. And there's a plethora of options there, especially some of the ideas that we spoke about today.
And I will be sending out a recording to everyone by email of this session.
Okay, Jill?
Hi, Cheryl. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned early in your presentation, which was great, thank you, something about research having to do with avatars and student engagement. Do you remember anything more about that study? I'd love to find it if I could.
If you will provide your email, I will look it up for you. I don't have the metrics that are associated with it, but it was in an article, professional article that I had read about, I think it was psychology, to be honest with you, and they were talking about the online learner being more engaged, and the retention was actually higher on those courses that allowed to have avatars, and obviously as we move forward, the video. So I will definitely do that. In fact, Jill, if you'll go ahead and put it in the chat window, I'll go ahead and copy it and provide it to you.
Thank you. That'd be great. I think my school is not sure what the value would be for us. I think they think it might be a risk or something. So if I could be more informed as I talk with them about that, because I love avatars too. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. And I did want to add that many universities, for right purposes, do not allow just arbitrary avatars. And so the majority of universities that I've worked with that are providing them are actually taking their student ID files and they're just uploading them into the system so that if the student and or the instructor wants to be able to use the avatars, they're just pulling from their student ID. So it isn't like a completely open-ended like a Facebook where you could just put anything you want up there.
I would actually love that even more for accreditation reasons. It's important that I make sure that the student doing work and participating and getting credit is all the same as the student who's actually registered. So I'm really happy to hear that some schools are able to pull student ID photos. That would be perfect for me.
Excellent.
Okay, well, I'll give somebody else a chance to ask. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Okay, and Vivian? Okay. Sarah, I'm not sure if we have a question from, okay, I see.
It looks like she's trying to find out how she can get these technologies for good prices.
Okay, the technology tools in Blackboard or the, let me see, I'll keep reading.
She's interested in webcams.
Oh, okay. I don't necessarily have those that would be, vendor specific, but I think the good news is I think they've certainly come down in price since they originally came out. And I would encourage, Sarah, I would encourage any of our listeners today, if you have any good resources, like the best places to go, especially for a bulk amount, to go ahead and share that amongst yourselves. That'd be great.
Allison, Cheryl said that she would email that to everyone. If you would type your email into the chat, we will make sure it gets sent to you.
Okay, any more questions, Sarah? Or I think that's about it on my end. I really have enjoyed being with you this afternoon. This has been a great experience, one of my favorite topics to talk about.
It looks like we've covered the questions. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you in future BIT sessions. We really appreciate all the peer-to-peer feedback you've provided today to each other. And as I said before, I'll be sure to send around the recording to everyone, and we'll also make sure that you get the article that was mentioned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.